Hello there! Welcome to Nerd.World Films. If you're new to this channel and you like what you're seeing on it, please like, share, subscribe and comment down below. It all helps, especially with the YouTube algorithm constantly trying to shun videos from the not so major channels like this one, which obviously this one's still very small, trying to make it grow. If you like this channel, I have two other channels, Nerd.World and Nerd.World History. Nerd.World is very similar to this one, but is focused on television and other forms of media and sci-fi and fantasy. And history is what it sounds. It's a more factually based channel, which I do in a more of a discussion format while giving some historical information about topics, subjects, events, and people from history that I find interesting, and hopefully everyone else will too. If you like those channels, or like what you think might be on them, please check them out. Like, share, subscribe, comment on those too. And today, on this video, if you didn't know from clicking on the link, which I'm sure you did, this is a discussion piece on Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. One of the funniest entries in the Star Trek franchise, where they decided to take a slightly more light-hearted approach to the subject matter. So it's a not-so-serious film which quite subtly manages to tell a morality tale, which Star Trek, at least classic Star Trek, was actually good at, with the basic theme being save the whales. Killing innocent creatures, we're damaging the world in ways we don't yet understand. And as many things in Star Trek, they were proven right. I mean, everyone realistically knows that killing the whales is a bad thing. It's actually, as they've proven recently, it's contributing to global warming. The effect on the ecosystem in the ocean is decreasing the diversity of life, which is preventing the oceans from absorbing as much of particulates in the atmosphere as what it used to, which is contributing to the global warming effect. So, Star Trek predicting the future again. But this film, it has some of the most amusing and comical scenes in it, which we'll get into, but it also has, as I said, a fairly serious undercurrent storyline. It also has the distinction of being the only Star Trek movie to not feature the Enterprise, at least not until the very end. The crew are flying around on a captured Klingon bird of prey that they redub the HMS Bounty. And the Klingon bird of prey is a ship that I adore. It's a beautiful design that came out of the 80s. It's one of the most enduring legacy designs of Star Trek, one of the most iconic vessels, and for that matter, it's just so cool looking, isn't it? But let's get started on this video. Okay, so the basic storyline of Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, as I stated in my last video, it's part of what's considered to be the best Star Trek trilogy within the franchise, with Star Trek 2, 3 and 4 following on from one another. 3 is probably the weakest link, but 4 is easily the second best. Because I'm not going to say it's better than The Wrath of Khan. I can't say anything's better than The Wrath of Khan. However, the basic story, the crew of the Enterprise, or now the HMS Bounty, have to report back to Earth with their borrowed Klingon bird of prey to face probable court-martial, etc., for their actions. They do their best to make the Klingon bird of prey as comfortable as possible for what's going to be an annoyingly long journey from Vulcan to Earth. They update the database, they clean it, they try to translate some of the consoles, and then they get the ship properly space-worthy and set off for Earth. Now, on their way, they find out that Earth is being paid another visit by what gets dubbed the Cetacean Probe. This was first detected entering Federation territory, and when intercepted, it instantly neutralized any vessel or outpost that it came too close to. They'd lose all power and just sit kind of drifting on emergency power, and that was it. Unrecoverable. When this probe finally reached Earth, nothing that Earth had, the defense Starfleet, none of the planetary defenses could even work because it just neutralized them. It then began to ionize the atmosphere and evaporating the oceans, causing big planetary storms that began to blot out the sun and cool the planet. And all of their attempts to either communicate with the probe or try to stop it failed. Picking up a distress signal from Earth warning all starships to stay away because they would lose power, as Earth was now quarantined until they could figure this out, Kirk and his crew looking very worried, obviously wondering what they can do to help. Spock manages to figure out, because they've uploaded a Federation database, that the transmission that the probe is sending out is different when you hear it underwater, and they realise it's whale sound. He manages to match it to humpback whales that have been extinct on Earth by this point for about 300 years, more or less. Coming pretty quickly to what was a fairly radical decision, after they established that the humpback whale didn't exist on any other planet other than Earth and was now officially a completely extinct species, even if there was an option to clone it or something, those DNA samples, if they exist, would be on Earth. It'd take too long. There wasn't really any other options. The cloning thing's more my head thought canon of another option they could have had. A decision is made to attempt time travel, utilizing time warp, a principle of time displacement that was established years earlier aboard the original Enterprise, when the Enterprise accidentally time warped back in time to 20th century Earth. This was something that, with the right amount of calculations, accounting for mass, math, technobabble, and a lot of suspension of disbelief, you could replicate and control where you wanted to go in time, even aboard a Klingon rust bucket like old bird of prey. They were able to, well, more accurately, Spock was able to figure out the calculations for how to get back to the 20th century so they could recover a couple of whales. This is successful. They managed to get back in time, but when they get there, they realize that, oh bugger, this has depleted the crappy Klingon dilithium, and the ship is now running low on power. They need to find a way to restore power, so now they have two missions. If they want to get back to the future, they will have to somehow find a way to repower the ship. Now, dilithium doesn't exist on Earth. It's a crystal that's found off-world and imported to Earth. So there's no way they can find more dilithium on Earth. So they need to find an alternative power source. In the 20th century, the most powerful power source is nuclear power. Luckily, they figure out a way to use nuclear particles to recrystallize the dilithium, at least enough, so that they will be able to restore power and get the ship back to the future. Anyway, the other mission, of course, is to locate whales, and they figure with primitive Klingon sensors, and the size of the ocean and how few whales there are, it's going to take a long time to locate any humpback whales. But then they find, at the Cetacean Institute, 2 whales, one of which is very conveniently pregnant, in a contained space where they can find them easily. With all the water they would need, everything, they would basically just scoop it all up, take it away. Brilliant. They just have to figure out a way to get them, but first they've got to have to gain access to them, and again figure out how to repower the ship. So the crew disembark, cloak the vessel, land, disembark, and they split off into teams, with Uhura, Jack and others going to look for power, with a fantastic scene that is now epically memed and epically Star Trek, looking for the nuclear vessels. I'm sorry, I won't try that again, but it's such a good scene anyway. Yeah, well, the others, Kirk, Spock, they go looking for the whales. Along the way, they encounter Dr. Gillian Taylor, a marine biologist who also happens to be the woman who is looking after the whales. She becomes, as anticipated, because who wouldn't, a little enamored with Kirk after Spock gets them both chucked out of the Institute because he jumps into the tank with the whales and attempts to mind meld with one. However, we do discover in this movie that whales are sentient, particularly at least humpback whales are, as Spock is able to communicate and talk to the whales, and discover that they actually kind of like Dr. Taylor. We also discover that Spock is crazy, because they're a bloody whale. Anyway, moving on. With her help, he manages to convince her what they need to do and why they need to do it. All the while, in the background, on their little side quest, Chekhov is getting himself arrested by the US military, interrogated because he's a Russian sneaking around a nuclear ship, which obviously no one amongst the Enterprise crew clearly studied their history and kind of forgot about the Cold War's even existence, so duh. Anyway, he gets injured, he ends up in a hospital, so they end up on another side quest to go and get him. McCoy cures a lady of dialysis. wonderful human being, one of my favourite characters in the original series. Rest in peace, DeForest Kelly. Your character was amazing. That said, I also liked Karl Urban's portrayal in the JJ movies. I like Karl Urban in general. Too much, according to my girlfriend, but what does she know? Now, after this, they managed to get Chekhov out in a beautifully funny chase of them escaping out of the hospital. He's now got the particles. Well, they've got the particles to re-energize the crystals, but now oh no, the whales are being released. And it sounds well and good. The whales are being released, but they're being released dumbly. She didn't know about it. Her comrades thought, nah, it'll be fine. You don't need to know. It'll be easy on you, little lady. You don't know. You won't be crying and sobbing and making us all uncomfortable while the whales are going out to sea. So then, now on their now fully functional bird of prey, they shoot out cloaked and manage to find the whales. But unfortunately, there's what I assume is a Norwegian, based on the language, and I may be wrong, it might not be Norwegian, it sounds like Norwegian, but as I don't speak Norwegian, I'm not really qualified to state. Let's say it's a Norwegian whaling ship, and it's about to harpoon them. They are seeing this at extremely long range. Now, speed in an atmosphere is limited because of drag and friction. The bird of prey kind of like to go to full impulse in the atmosphere, so it's got to really dive in and try and get there quickly, straining the inertial dampeners as they scream into place. And I'm kind of surprised that the wind shear from the vessel didn't sink the trawler, but hey, physics. Then that has the fantastic scene of the bird of prey decloaking and violating the temporal prime directive and letting these poor fishermen get some kind of psychological distress for the rest of their lives. It's a great scene. They then beam the whales up, plus all the water, which is countless tons of water and whale, into the now modified cargo containers, which again was another side quest, going back to it, where Scotty has a stupid moment of talking to a computer and then tries talking to a mouse. He invents a new type of alloy, and gives it to a man in exchange for a load of plastic and metals and other materials they need to seal up the Klingon cargo bays, which are not watertight, because obviously it's not a cargo vessel, it's a warship. They were designed to store targs and gach, not whales. So he had to do extensive modifications. Sulu had to learn to fly a helicopter. It's one of the many amusing side quests, and it works. It should feel like a film that's a bit overblown, maybe a little overbloated with all these silly little side quests that are going on. It's like doing a ridiculous quest in Warcraft, where you have to go fetch some water, pick up a doll, pet a dog, scratch something, and then kill a pig, and then woohoo, you've got a helmet or something. Anyway, they eventually get them on board the ship. They leave the atmosphere. They get their projections for time warp again, get around the sun, and yay, they're back in their own time, and oh crap, there's the cetacean probe, we're losing power, oh bugger. So they then pretty much crash into San Francisco Bay. They open up the cargo bays, the bird of prey starts to sink, they all toddle to the surface. The whales swim off, and then they're really hopeful that the whales are going to communicate with the probe, because really this was an untested theory. I mean, they could, like Spock had said, they could have tried to run the language through Universal Translator, but as they had no frame of reference, they couldn't understand it. They could try to respond to the probe in whale speak, but they'd be talking gibberish. It might make things worse. They might be looking for a specific answer, a code they just didn't have. So they get these whales, and the whales start doing a funny little dance under the water, and they talk to the probe. The probe puts its balls away and then shoots off into space, and all the power comes back on and everybody's happy. And then at the end of the film, it does have another quite memorable scene, which I always thought was quite good. Kirk was clearly never happy as an admiral, and part of his journey in these films was the realization that he never should have taken a desk job. He never should have let them take him out of that chair. Don't let yourself get promoted. Don't let them transfer you. Don't do anything that takes you out of that chair, off the bridge of that ship, because that's where you belong. That's where he belonged, and he knew that. If he wasn't in command of a starship, a job he was born to do, of all the jobs he was ever going to do, he wasn't going to be a lawyer, he wasn't going to be a lifeguard, he wasn't going to be a dog walker. This man was a starship captain. He was a command officer, an explorer, a scientist, and a soldier. He was a leader, but he wasn't the kind of leader who wanted to sit in an office and tell people to go do things. He wanted to go and do it. And as an admiral, he was limited by that. And at the end of this movie, he gets a wonderful scene to thunderous applause of him being demoted to captain from admiral. For anyone else in the history of Starfleet, in fact before Starfleet, that would have been a reason to resign, a catastrophic move in their career. But in his case, it was cause for celebration, and we discover that a new Enterprise has been built. At least I was assumed built. I don't think they could have salvaged the old ones. It must be a new ship. That's what I always figured. Even what God, 5 is next. Anyway, they get the Enterprise A, Constitution class, refitted and all shiny and broken, but it's theirs and it's a new ship. And that brings us to basically the story of this. You have now a misfit marine biologist in the 23rd century who was a bit of a lost character. I know there is some beta canon on what happened to her afterwards. How she actually got assigned to a ship. She became the head of cetacean research and studies on Earth, and obviously looked after the whales and made sure that they bred properly. Must have been a lot of inbreeding with those whales, but eventually, given a few generations, I suppose it might work itself out. Or maybe they got some kind of space technology to fix inbreeding or something. Now, I know there's all that kind of side canon to her character, but I consider that all beta, so take it as you will. Obviously she did something, but she never appears in Star Trek again, and I believe she may be referenced here and there, but there's not much you ever see or hear from her again. And a bit of a shame, because I really liked her character, and I really like this movie. It's a fantastic film from what may be one of the greatest eras of Star Trek movie production, which I don't think it's really ever surpassed. Some of the films that have come after it are probably as good as standalones, but we now enter the phase of Star Trek films being really bad on the odd numbers and on the positive numbers being good. And that started from the first film, but after this trilogy you kind of feel it more. Which brings me to what I feel about this film, how I actually view it. And I grew up on these movies. I grew up on these films. When I was a kid, both the Next Generation and original series were both on TV, and I watched all these films. And I remember being quite confused about why the technology of Kirk's ship was so much less advanced than that of Picard's, but I was 5 or something. But these films, I still love them as an adult. I have them on DVD or Blu-ray. Blu-ray? No, just DVD at the moment. But I do love them. I love these films, and I love this one. Star Trek 2, Star Trek 4, and some of the others. I'm not going to get into in the later ones yet. But I love these movies, and I grew up on these movies, and this is one of my favorites. It's funny. It's as much a comedy as it is a space adventure and a romp. And also, they use a bird of prey. It's also the only Star Trek film without battle sequences in it. There's nothing. There's no fighting, no war, no conflict. Everything's almost... It's not fluff. I mean, it's Fate of the Earth, but it's like you don't notice. It's a demonstration on how to make a good, exciting, fun adventure movie without it needing to be violent or destructive or have to rely on too many special effects. And that's why I can't give this film anything less than the ultimate fanfare, which would be a 6 out of 6 in my scoring system. So it's a fantastic film, and I love it dearly. And I recommend these films to anyone. And if you're a Star Trek fan, you must have seen them already. And I mean, they're well cast. It's these actors at doing what they do, but almost parodying themselves. Some of their, like, Chekhov has always been a bit of a parody of a Russian character anyway, but in this he turns it up to 11. He becomes a true parody of himself, almost like he's trying to get caught. He's trying to look suspicious. He's just wonderfully camp and wonderfully funny. And it's the same with all of them. They are having a blast, and you can tell when a cast and a crew are enjoying making a film. You can see it in how they act and how much they just love what they're doing, and it shines through in this movie. So, that said, moving on. Like everyone, like, share, subscribe, comment down below if you liked this film, and if you liked this video. Tell me what you think about it. Which is your favorite Star Trek movie, or your favorite movie? It doesn't have to be a Star Trek one, it can be Star Wars. It should be Star Trek, but you can like a Star Wars film too, that's fine. And thanks for watching. Bye bye.